Beyond the buzzer, inside the game, this is SportsIQ with Larry Smith.
Happy Wednesday to you. Glad you're with us here on the SportsIQ. Great show coming up here. In a couple of minutes, we'll talk with Matt Perkins. Wisconsin Badgers, again, a team that really, it seemed like they won the lottery when they brought in Luke Fickell as the head coach from Cincinnati. Things have not gone the way they would have liked there in Madison. We'll get a kind of the test the waters there up there with the Badgers with Matt here in a couple of minutes. And then a bit later, Eric Hansen joining us talking Notre Dame. We had worked to get Eric on an earlier show several days ago, had a scheduling conflict, and so happy that we can get him back on his calendar. We'll talk about the Irish. By the way, Notre Dame, producer Tony doing his preseason top 25. I don't think we've heard Notre Dame's name called yet. Today is number 8 on the top 25. Could today be the day? Could it be an Irish kind of day? We'll find out. I don't know. He never tells me. I know when when we go on air. So we'll all find out together. How about that? He's a little stinker. He doesn't tell us to know those things. Hey, happy birthday today to you. Kirk Cousins turning 38, the Raiders quarterback, former tennis star. Mary Jo Fernandez turning 55. Kurt Herbstreit, the former Ohio State quarterback, turned ESPN star, 57 years old today. Morton Anderson, the Pro Football Hall of Fame kicker, Saints and Falcons, 66 years old today. Gary Gaedel, the two-time All-Star, Minnesota Twins, third baseman, is 68. Bobby Richardson, 8-time All-Star, the Yankees second baseman, 91 years young today. Happy birthday to Bobby Richardson. If you were born on the 19th of August, you also share a birthday with the former Chicago White Sox owner, Charles Comiskey. The park was named after him for many decades, born today. On this day in 1859, and also the legendary jockey Bill Shoemaker, born on this day in 1931. A couple of headlines for you. Record-setting night in Milwaukee. The Brewers smacked the Mariners 22-0 to tie MLB's modern-day era for biggest shutout. The Brewers not known for their power, but 3 guys hitting 3-run homers: Christian Yelich, David Hamilton, and Luis Lara, the 21-year-old, the rookie, hitting his first career homer. Jake Bainers added a 2-run shot. 22 runs ties a franchise best set at Toronto almost exactly 34 years ago, August 28th, 92. 22 hits sets a season high for the Brewers. By the way, other 22-0 games, 1901, Pittsburgh at the Cubs, pre-Wrigley Field, by the way. 2004, Cleveland did it at the Yankees. Fernando Tatis smacking Fernando Tatis Jr., I should say. Dad said, wait a minute, I didn't smack nothing. Pair of homers for Tatis Jr., but it was his glove work that got the oohs and ahs. The Padres outfielder reaching over the wall and robbing Francisco Lindor of a potential second-inning grand slam. Tatis admitting robbery today was more fun. He struggled earlier this season, but now has 15 homers in his last 250 at-bats. Padres beating the Mets on the road 5-2. Phillies have won 5 straight, best current streak in baseball. They beat the Mariners 6-4 Tuesday night. Phillies batting around in the 6th inning. Bryson Stott with a 2-run single to put Philly on top. That key to 4-run inning. Stott now has reached base in 19 straight games. That series continues tonight. By the way, Sandy Alcantara going for his 14th win this season for Miami. Off the field, cancer survivor Trey Mancini has decided to retire. The 34-year-old was named the Comeback Player of the Year in 2021 after returning from a battle with colon cancer and helped Houston win the World Series a year later. He played 5 games for the Angels before being released in June. And congrats in order for Karl Anthony Towns, an NBA champion in June, a husband in August. The New York Knicks center marrying TV personality Jordan Woods over the weekend. The couple had dated for 5 years. Time now for today's moment of awe. And there's not much left of this moment other than that iconic photo 75 years ago today, August 19th, 1951. Eddie Gaedel was born to an immigrant family in Chicago. As a teenager, he worked on airplanes as a riveter during World War II. But at his full height at 3 feet and 7 inches, his earliest claim to fame was as a mascot to promote Mercury Records. Then came 1951 and St. Louis Browns owner Bill Veeck, who signed Gaedel to a contract and then called for him to pinch hit in the first inning during Game 2 of a doubleheader in St. Louis. Gaedel, instructed not to swing, walked on 4 pitches, and was then lifted for a pinch runner, becoming the shortest Major League Baseball player ever. His contract was voided the next day, leaving him with the total earnings of $100 as a pro baseball player and a career on-base percentage of 1,000. When Gaedel died a decade later, the only major leaguer to attend his funeral was the pitcher he faced, Bob Kane, even though they never met. And that's our moment of awe.
You're listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Sports IQ with Larry Smith continues here. 19th of August is Wednesday. Hopefully it's a good one for you so far. Producer Tony is with our first guest.
Well, thanks so much, Larry. You know, the Big Ten has been scary good for 3 years. And that's without Wisconsin being at the top of their game, because the Badgers over the last 20 years prior to that had proven to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten. They're trying to get back to that. Last season ended on some high notes. We're lucky enough to have Matt Perkins joining us. He is a producer of the Believe in Badgers podcast. Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate you joining us. Let's talk about this Badgers 2026 season, shall we?
Yeah, always great to be here. Appreciate you guys having me.
So, Matt, they closed strong at the end of last year. Better than the first part of the season. Gave them some hope coming in. So much so that they've extended the contract of the head coach. Was that a good move to keep Luke Fickell now around till, I believe it's 2031, if I read correctly?
I think they had to, given the fact that if they had gone fishing for a head coach, they were going to be like the 7th or 8th best job on the market. And at that point, you're not going to get your pick of the litter. So, you know that LSU and Florida and Penn State and all these other jobs are going to be able to outbid you, probably are a little bit more attractive to the higher echelon coaches. So why not keep Fickell? He's actually been recruiting at a decently high clip. Keep Fickell around, make some tweaks on the coaching staff. They brought in Eric Mateos, the offensive line coach from Arkansas, who I think is actually a huge move. I think that's probably the biggest addition of this offseason, was bringing in Mateos, who, when he worked with Jeff Grimes, both at Baylor and BYU, produced some incredible offensive lines. And I think that tandem there now with Grimes and Mateos running the offense has at least a modicum of hope for Badger fans that we will get back to seeing old school Wisconsin football, running the ball, bullying people on the offensive line. So I think in that case, it made sense. And also, they didn't have the money to buy out Luke Fickell, buy out the coaches, bring in an entire another staff, as well as pay players in NIL, the transfer portal, etc. So I don't think it would have been a wise move to get rid of Fickell, despite the diminishing returns on the field over the past 3 seasons.
So looking at this ground game, this was a Wisconsin team that was used to running over people, right? I mean, that was the MO. This was a team that regularly rushed for over 300 yards a game. Last year, when they were able to get over 150, they were successful. When they were under 150, not so much. Can they get back to that area? Do they have the talent? We've got some coaches now, but do they have the talent on the offensive line, and do they have talent in the backfield to get that mark where so that they can run for 200 yards a game?
I think that they do. And maybe that is me drinking a little too much hopium these days. But I think that Mateos has really reconfigured this offensive line. They lost guys to the transfer portal. They have had to move a couple guys around the offensive line. Emerson Mandel, who is a natural guard, was playing right tackle last year because they couldn't get the left tackle situation figured out for themselves at all. But now he's back to playing his natural spot at guard. They bring in Austin Kowecki from Oklahoma State to start at center, who's a proven starter. They've got Kevin Haywood, who is this kid that was supposed to be the starter last year at left tackle, hurt himself in spring ball, missed the entirety of the 2025 season. A very high 4-star recruit, All-American, coming out of Pennsylvania in high school. And he's someone who the coaches have been raving about. People are, banding about some all-time great names when they compare him. And so he's going to be starting this year at right tackle. And they bring in PJ Wilkins from Ole Miss to start. A lot of people thought he would be a guard, but he's actually going to be their starting left tackle. And I think that there is a lot of confidence in this offensive line. Pair that with Abu Sama, who is the transfer running back from Iowa State, who has shown some real explosiveness. Darian Dupree comes back. He's had some flashes as well. They also bring in both JUCO All-American Juju Pope, as well as Brian Jackson, the big tailback from USC. I feel like people are pretty confident in the combination of the backfield, the offensive line, and the offensive line in order to make it so that this team can get back to being a run first team. And don't forget about Colton Joseph, the quarterback. He's got some legs as well.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Colton. It's, the Badgers haven't had much success at quarterback over the last few years. They've tried going to the portal, they've tried homegrown talent. It just hasn't really worked out too well. But not a lot of people are aware of Colton Joseph. Playing down there at Old Dominion and now coming in and being the Wisconsin. He could be one of the real finds out of the transfer portal this season.
He could be if he can avoid the curse of Wisconsin Badger quarterbacks in the last couple of years, which is staying healthy. Wisconsin has not had a healthy transfer quarterback yet. Tanner Mordecai was the closest thing that they had to one, and even he was banged up and missed a bunch of games 3 seasons ago. Now, they probably don't want him running as much as he was at Old Dominion in order to make that happen, but the coaches are very excited about his combination of leadership, athleticism, and just being able to be a little bit more dynamic with the ball in his hands. And I think that the second year in the Grimes offensive system is going to start to pay dividends for this team as well. They tried 2 years of Phil Longo that went over like a wet fart in Madison, and now they are getting back to a system that people are a little bit more accustomed to and a little bit more confident in. I think in a run first bully ball mentality. I think Colton Joseph fits this well because he will be able to run a little bit as well. And so I think that there is cautious optimism right now for the offensive side of the ball.
And the defensive side, Wisconsin has always been strong in the trenches. They've also usually come up with some really good DBs to play that have made the transition to the next level. What's Wisconsin look like coming in this year off the defense? And can they compete? There's a lot of really good defenses in the Big Ten right now. Can they compete at that level, or are they just a shade below that level, do you think?
So there are sort of 2 question marks here on the defense. They lost their top 6 interior defensive linemen from, or I should say their top 4 interior defensive linemen from this past year to the draft. Now, they brought in a couple transfers here that have really shown out, and they also had a huge offseason jump from Charles Perkins. I think he's the big name to watch out for on this defensive line. All the reports out of camp are that he is playing at an all Big Ten level, and is someone who could be a true disruptor on the interior of the defense. The linebackers that come back: Cooper Catalano, Mason Posa. Mason Posa, freshman All-American last year. You absolutely understand when you watch him play out there. He looks like an old school Wisconsin linebacker. So does Catalano. Catalano is like Chris Borland reincarnate at the linebacker position. But if the defensive line can do enough, take on double teams, plug enough gaps to let Post and Catalano run free, I think this will be a pretty good defense. But the other thing is that they lost a lot of their secondary. They have one returning starter in Matt Young. Otherwise, they hit the transfer portal very heavy. Marvin Burks comes over from Missouri, should start at the other safety spot next to Young. Javen Robinson is someone who's really impressed at camp at one of the cornerback positions. And the second cornerback position is sort of still up for grabs. And it looks like Jameer Scott, who is a redshirt freshman, is probably going to be starting at nickel for them. But there is still a lot of questions as to who the top defensive back group will look like and how that will shake out as well. They have a fair bit of young talent there, but I think that's probably the biggest question mark still is the defensive backfield for Wisconsin going into the season.
The schedule maker, we've talked about a lot of teams here in the past month on SportsIQ looking at schedules. How did they do? How did this one do? In this era where everybody's schedule is a little bit different, the schedule maker was pretty kind to Wisconsin. The toughest road games, you got to go to Iowa, to Penn State, to UCLA. That's not too bad. You miss Ohio State entirely, you miss Oregon entirely, and you miss Indiana entirely in the Big Ten schedule. That sounds like a schedule that is at least set up for this team to me, looking at it, go a minimum of 8-4 this year.
Yeah, it's the opposite of last year, where they got all those teams. Last year was an absolute gauntlet. You couple that with the quarterback injuries, and it was always going to be uphill sledding for them. But, they still do get USC. They still have Penn State, who I know people are starting to get higher on. The Penn State Cyclones, as I think some people are starting to talk about them and I think that UCLA game is going to be really tricky. I'm really high on UCLA this year. I think Bob Chesney is as good a hire as anyone made in college football this year. I absolutely love him as a head coach, and I think he's going to turn the Bruins around in very short order. So that trip to Pasadena is going to be a very tricky one in October. But the schedule does set up very nicely for Wisconsin this year. They do get USC at home, and now I think USC obviously is going to be a pretty big favorite in that game. They start the year in Lambeau Field against Notre Dame. I think Wisconsin, as we're talking right now, is like a 21, 22-point underdog in that one, give or take. So people aren't expecting a lot out of the Badgers in that one. Nonetheless, I think that it's a pretty good litmus test to start the year to see where you are against a preseason top 5 team in Notre Dame. But there's no reason that this team shouldn't win a at least 6 games in conference, if not 7, the way that the schedule shakes out for them. So I think that there is, again, like some real optimism there about how their final record could be. They get Minnesota at home. Iowa on the road is always going to be tough. But, they've got a pretty bad taste in their mouths considering the butt whooping that Iowa gave them at homecoming last year in Madison. I think that there will be extra motivation there as if they needed it when you're playing Iowa. But there should be some extra motivation there to really go out hard after the Hawkeyes this fall. But it is definitely welcome relief to not have the gauntlet of Oregon and Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, even going to Washington, things like that this year that they've had in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I like I said, I like the way the schedule sets up. I think it's something that could help Wisconsin, especially it allows you to get your feet under. Look, starting off with Notre Dame is never going to be easy, but that's one of those games where you can build a lot of momentum even if you just keep that game close, right? If this is a 10-point game, and Notre Dame's had issues in the past 4 or 5 years with slipping up early against teams that they probably should beat, i.e. Northern Illinois. So there's a chance there for Wisconsin.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I'm not saying they're making the Big Ten title game. They're not going to make the Big Ten title game. I think that for me, this is Oregon's year. I think Oregon's my preseason pick to win the Big Ten and win the national title this year. I think they've got it all full. I think they've all got it all laid out for them. Yes, they have 2 new coordinators, but I believe in Dan Lanning. I believe in Dante Moore, and I believe in the talent that they have on both sides of the ball. But I also think that, Wisconsin, should be maybe finish right around 4 or 5 in the Big Ten this year because of that schedule. So I can see 8-4, potentially 9-3. And I think that will go a long way towards building some more goodwill for Coach Fickell and this staff. The low end is 6-6 for this team. I think people will be pretty disappointed with 6-6. 7-5 is right where Vegas sort of has them, and I think 7-5 is sort of going to be like the bare minimum for fans to say, okay, like we see where this is going. We think it's going in the right direction. They have an incredible 2027 recruiting class as it stands, set to come in. So then we'll get okay. We believe it. We'll keep moving there forward. But I think 7-5 is sort of like the baseline that people are expecting.
Awesome. Matt Perkins, thank you so much for joining us. Matt is the producer of the Believe in Badgers podcast. Really appreciate it. If you're a Badgers fan, check it out. You got to get that information. You got to stay tuned in as the season progresses. Matt, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. And shout out to my co-host on Believe in Badgers, Matt Bernstein. He is the honorary captain for homecoming this year against Michigan State.
Awesome. That'll be cool. We'll have to check out and make sure we watch that ball game. Appreciate it, Matt. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
We're going to take a quick break on SportsIQ, but we'll be back with more right after this.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? There's a tremendous price war among the major term life companies. Rates have dropped dramatically in the past 2 years. For example, a man age 45 non-tobacco user, $1 million of coverage is only $75 per month, level for the next 10 years. Or a man age 50 non-tobacco user can buy $500,000 of coverage for a monthly premium of only $110, guaranteed not to change for the next 20 years. That's right, level rates for 20 years. And if you're a smoker, we have great rates for you as well. At the Term Lifeline, we specialize in policies of $500,000 and above. So if you're looking for new or replacement term life insurance, call right now for a free quote.
Rates and availability may vary by state. Sample rate quotes are based on preferred non-tobacco underwriting exam required to qualify.
Call 855-826-7932. 855-826-7932. That's 855-826-7932.
Welcome back here to the show. And we want to take a moment just to give a tribute to one of the great pioneers of media, sports media, what we do. ESPN founder Bill Rasmussen passing away at the age of 93. They say that the worldwide leader says that he died of Parkinson's at his home in Florida. Rasmussen was a real visionary, launched ESPN back in the late 1970s. And of course, it's become a global phenomenon. I love the stories that have come out here lately about ESPN and about Rasmussen, how he'd lost his gig with like the Hartford Whalers and had this idea and actually literally realized that it was actually cheaper to get satellite space to cover the entire country and not just something that's regional. So maxed out his credit cards to secure that satellite space, went door to door trying to get this thing going. And of course, it's taken off. As we've mentioned several times, producer Tony and I were at CNN for a number of years, our paths crossing for about 10 years together. That Tony did, close to 20 years. I did 16 years. Neither of us ever worked for ESPN, never had a desire to work for ESPN. I never sent a tape to ESPN. Doesn't mean I didn't like them. I just prefer living in Atlanta and love that. So, but we had so many friends there at ESPN, and so just to there was a fellowship, and we knew every day. I remember sharing a plane ride once during the NBA Finals with one of the executive producers of their NBA broadcast, and he said, he said every morning we wake up in Bristol and we're like, what are those guys in Atlanta doing? And we know you're thinking the same thing. So as things changed, as CNN Sports kind of went away, and it is now kind of a shadow of what it used to be. I know it was kind of sad in the industry that we didn't have that, but anyway. To Bill Rasmussen, sir, job well done, and rest in peace as we give our thoughts out to his family and ESPN. Boy, what a visionary, and think about those of you who have no idea. You have no idea what it was like to not have ESPN. And I remember back in the day when ESPN first was on air, the big thing that they would show is Australian rules football and CFL football, and I loved it. I mean, my favorite player, literally as a kid, other than Walter Payton, as I was a Bear fan, was DeWalt, the quarterback for oh my goodness, in the CFL. Was it Calgary? No, British Columbia. Anyway, I digress. ESPN awesome, and again, the Rasmussen family, our thoughts are out to them. Hey, want to get to some WNBA stories meanwhile. How about Kelsey Mitchell last night? 29 points, 16 in their first quarter. Indiana getting the win, 101-95 over Toronto. Caitlin Clark also scoring 24 points. Boy, the Fever right now just are really playing some really good basketball in this. In fact, Mitchell basically sat out the fourth quarter in this. But those two, Clark and Mitchell, have each scored 20 or more in the same game 16 times this season. That is a new WNBA record. It breaks the mark of 15 set back In 2008, Diana Taurasi, who just had her retired over weekend there in Phoenix, and Cappy Pondexter did it 15 times back then. By the way, Mitchell, 20th straight game with 20 or more. That matches Asia Wilson for the longest such streak in WNBA history. And again, she's second leading scorer in the W, 24.2, behind Wilson, 26.1. As they get that win. Now, speaking of Asia Wilson and Las Vegas, they lost last night at home, 97-82. But boy, the story here was Becky Hammond, the head coach, ejected in the first half. She was just livid. Second quarter, she got a double technical, arguing a non-call on a drive by Wilson. As she threw the shot up, she was hit. The ball hit the bottom of the rim, and she lost it, and she was out of the game. Ryan Howard, by the way, 23 points. Angel Reese, 21, 10 rebounds. Her league-leading 24th double-double. Atlanta getting the win there on the road, 97-82. Boy, but it was something else. Asia Wilson, meanwhile, 27 points, 14 rebounds, 4 blocks. The Aces reserves had only 8 points combined in there. So right now, you look in terms of Las Vegas and where they are, slipping now as the streaking Indiana Fever have won 5 in a row. They're now sitting in third place overall in the standings. Golden State is winning 6 in a row. And big story for Golden State, meanwhile, they picked, and this is a great call, to host the WNBA All-Star Game next year. They're at Chase Center. They've exceeded all expectations out there, seeing out like every game in franchise history, going back to the opening game last year in their first ever game. So the Valkyries, Golden State hosting it. Love it for them. All right, more conversation to come after this. As you guys know, producer Tony is like the biggest Notre Dame fan that I know. No one else that I know, not saying it doesn't exist, has as many Notre Dame things on his wall, in addition to as many Notre Dame tattoos. So naturally, producer Tony is going to be with our next guest. Tony, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Larry. College football getting ready, counting down the days now to the start of the season. We get going a week from Saturday, and we will finally be getting to week 0 of the college football season. One of the key early games, at least for me as a Notre Dame fan, is Notre Dame taking on Wisconsin over there in Green Bay. It's the first game for the Fighting Irish this year. And we're lucky enough to have Eric Hansen, senior writer for blueandgold.com, joining us. Eric has been covering Notre Dame for a while now. Let's just put it that way. He and I share something in common. We both have a lot of gray in the beard at this point in time. Eric, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
We're doing great. It's a little hot here in South Georgia, but we are ready for football season to get going. Let's chat about the Notre Dame team coming in. High expectations coming in for this Irish team after not making the playoff last year. They lost the first 2 games, went on a 10-0 run, but still missed out on the playoff. What is people expecting in the South Bend area for this Fighting Irish football team?
Right. So the AP poll came out at the beginning of the week, and Notre Dame's number 4 ranking is its highest in a preseason poll in 20 years. And I think that people in South Bend have even higher expectations than that. I think they feel like this is the first real time they are going into the season feeling like they have a legitimate chance at a national title since the Holtz years. So the peak Holtz years, like late 80s and early 90s. Now, they did get to the championship game a couple years ago, but that was not expected going into that season.
Right. So the expectations a little bit higher coming into this season. When I look at this Notre Dame team, the one area that concerns me as a fan is finding a way to replace Jeremiah Love. When you lose Love and Price in the same backfield, that's a lot of production and a lot of big hitting production. There's so many games that Jeremiah Love was able to bust things open with a run here or a run there. Coming in, how do you feel about the running game for Notre Dame headed into this season?
I think it's going to surprise people how good it is. And it sounds like I've put bourbon in my coffee cup saying that, because of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. but there are 5 really good running backs in that running backs room, and they have maybe the best running backs coach in the country in Jaywan Sider, just what he did at Penn State before coming to Notre Dame, and then what he did at Notre Dame in his first year with Love and Price. Those guys weren't 5 stars coming out of high school. They were highly recruited backs and so forth, but they weren't 5-star running backs. Notre Dame is loaded with guys that were ranked similarly, including one from Georgia, Jonas Walton, who I think is going to be a star. I mean, I talked to some of the scouts that have been at practice, and they are saying, whoa, these running backs are a lot better than we thought they were going to be. They have different sizes and different strengths. There's a kid coming off an ACL tear named Kedron Young, who's kind of Audric Estime-ish, a 5'11", 234-pound back that gives him some short yardage expertise and so forth. Aeneas Williams is a kid from St. Louis area. Just like Jeremiah Love is probably going to be the alpha of that group. But between that and a much improved offensive line, I think people will be surprised at how good the running game is.
They've had a couple of injuries along the offensive line. How does it look shaping up coming into the season? They seem to have a little bit more depth than they had among that group as we head into the start of the season anyway.
Yeah, and you really look at the last 2 years, they've had to replace starters within the season each of the last 2 years. And they went into spring saying, okay, we want to be 10 deep. We want to really focus on building depth because maybe this is inevitable for us. The 2 main pieces that are missing right now, Charles Jagaza, who is a 5-star kid coming out of high school, has played very little football at Notre Dame. When he has played, he has been spectacular, but he hasn't played very much. I don't expect him back before the middle of the season. If he comes back this year, he suffered a upper arm injury in a UTV accident in the summer of 2025. He had 6 surgeries in 8.5 months after that. He is finally starting to have some sustained healing. It's about, the nerve damage finally kind of regenerating and then him also building strength back up. When he's healthy, he's Notre Dame's best offensive lineman, but they're so good without him. They lost a really important piece of Matty Augustine about a week ago, redshirt freshman, although I guess we don't call him redshirt freshman anymore with this 5-on-5 rule. So he's a sophomore. And he is a guy who was probably going to be Notre Dame's starting right tackle in place of Jagaza. And he's also one of right guard, and he's also one of Notre Dame's best backup tackle options. So that they really don't need another injury there. They could probably sustain one more and still have the same level of being a Joe Moore Award finalist kind of contender. But I really like the pieces they have in that offensive line.
The team coming in, to the season, like you said, the highest ranking that they've had in quite some time going in, but everything else is really stable. And they were successful, I would say, in the portal as far as dealing with filling areas that you needed to fill, especially from the wideout standpoint. Is that are the new guys, are these portal acquisitions, are they assimilating well so far as we head into the year?
They are. So they've had 8 transfers at different areas. A lot of those guys will be starters. And this was a departure from Notre Dame in that all but one of them were underclassmen. Usually they're only taking grad transfers, or in case Riley Leonard, somebody that was very close to being a graduate. But they went for freshmen and sophomore, and those were impossible to get through the admissions before, and they've kind of found a middle ground with players that they had recruited the first time around, players they like. They've figured out how to do the transfer credits. But their biggest acquisitions, I would say their most impactful, are going to be at the 2 positions they lacked most in the 2024 title game. That's wide receiver and defensive line. One of the wide receivers is really excelling. Milan Graham, who's from Ohio State. He's a junior. And he's a field receiver, and he brings a lot of speed and athleticism. He just moves differently. Um, on the other side is Quincy Porter, who's a boundary receiver, big 6'4" kid. He had surgery while he was in the portal in January. It was patella surgery. He is still on the comeback trail. I mean, he does some things in practice. We haven't seen him in contact yet. So he may not be ready at the start of the season. They are encouraged by his timeline, but they have so many guys at that position that are really good that they're not really worried if he's not ready right at the get-go. But they feel like Quincy Porter can be, I mean, he was a 5-star kid coming out of high school. He's behind Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, and they feel like he could be, an All-American at some point in his career.
The Notre Dame faithful were a little bit concerned going into last year, having lost Al Golden and coming on with Chris Ash. I know fans that I had talked to were, kind of clutching the rosary beads a little bit for Chris Ash, and getting off to the start that they didn't help his standing with the fans. You feel? How does the people inside the program feel about Chris Ash at this point in time heading into the 2026 campaign?
Well, I think it's hard when you change schemes, and there was a drastic philosophical change in scheme, and I'm not sure, especially the linebackers struggled with playing football in a really different way. It wasn't just a terminology difference. It was a whole different way of thinking about playing football. And they finally got it together, and then there was a great buy-in. They ended up being 22nd in the country in total defense, 11th in scoring defense, and it was one of the best rush defenses Notre Dame has had in a while. There's complete buy-in now with Chris Ash. He's got 3 new assistants, but I think the defensive line coach, Charlie Partridge, is a huge upgrade. He has been recruiting his butt off, and he has been watching him teach and practice is really a treat. I think the defense is going to be off the charts good. Somebody asked me if it would be Notre Dame's best defense ever, and I said, now, ever is a long time, especially at a place like Notre Dame, but I think this is a really, really good defense. I think it's better than their defense last year, and that was a pretty good unit once it got its stuff together. But having those coordinators back on both sides of the ball helps you so much. You're not teaching scheme. You can really start at a higher floor in terms of what you're trying to get done.
Absolutely. For Notre Dame, obviously success is measured differently than a lot of other schools, right? There's no conference title to play for. There's no conference championship game to play for. So for Notre Dame, you've got to get to the playoff in order for it to be a successful season. I think that's easily within grasp of this group, right? Coming in. Is it, I think the question I'm looking for here, is it anybody inside the program thinking that maybe it's time to get that conference I see a lot of things in the media in these days, people going, oh, Notre Dame's got to join. Notre Dame's got to join. I always ask myself, why? They've got what they need. They're doing what they can do. And they're still a really good football team, and they're still the only brand out there that can do what they can do. Why join a conference? Is there any talk inside that area among the powers to be to thinking about joining a conference full time as college football continues to evolve? Because right now we got 18 team conferences. Who knows in 5 years if we may have 2016 team conferences?
It's a pretty easy question to answer. You said, is there any internal talk? It's an internal joke at Notre Dame. If a toilet gets clogged, join a conference. If, the steaks get burned, join a conference. I mean, that's everybody outside. That's their solution to what Notre Dame should do. And when Notre Dame has had sketchy seasons, their own fan base will say, join a conference, as if that's going to be the elixir. Here's the 3 pillars that keep them as a football independent. One of these has to crumble for them to consider it. So these are the 3. These are the 3 to pay attention to. One is if they do not have access to a national championship. When you think about the first part of the discussions for the 4-team playoff, there was discussions about the 4 teams that made it would have to be conference champs, and then they went away from that, and that allowed Notre Dame to stay there. The second one is there a place for their basketball teams, for their Olympic sports teams to live? When the Big East imploded, they were homeless and they had to find something, and the ACC said, we'll take you, and you don't have to be a full-time member. If the ACC, for example, were to crumble at some point, then they would need to go looking. The third part of it is the media rights deal. And they've had that NBC contract since 1991. And before the latest extension, the differential between what NBC was paying and what they got from the ACC as well, and what the SEC and the Big Ten were doing, looked scary. That looked like a gap that they couldn't make up. Well, NBC made it up. So Notre Dame is in the tier financially with the SEC and the Big Ten, as opposed to ACC and the Big 12. So they can have the great facilities. They can keep the great assistant coaches. And that's really important. So if one of those went away, then you would be talking about conference membership. But right now, there's just no reason to do that.
Absolutely. We got about a minute left, Eric. What do you want to see in that game against Wisconsin as Notre Dame gets ready for them? What do you think are the standards that Notre Dame should be looking at?
Well, when you look at practice, people go, what's the weakness? And I go, the media? I don't know. I mean, it's really difficult to find it. And I think that team needs to show up on September 6th in Lambeau Field. Notre Dame in Marcus Freeman's time in his first 4 years is 3-5 in its first 2 games combined of the seasons. They've channeled their whole offseason to be a better team out of the gate. And they're going to need to be, because they're going to be facing elite teams in future years in those first 2 games, just like they did last year. So I want to see a team that doesn't have a lot of catch up to do after that first week. Everybody does have some. You learn things about your team, but one that's much more of a complete product than it has been in the past.
Awesome. Eric Hansen, thank you so much for joining us. Eric is the senior writer for blueandgold.com. Go check him out. Check out his stuff. If you're a Notre Dame fan, get on board. It could be a special season up there in South Bend this year. Appreciate it, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a quick break on the Sports IQ, but we'll be back with more after this.
Listen, were you forced into getting a solar contract and now you just don't want it anymore? Maybe the solar company misled you. Or is your solar contract buried with hidden fees? Are you not saving the amount of money you thought you would on your energy costs? Don't worry. At the Solar Exit Hotline, we can help you cancel your solar contract, even if the panels are already installed. Our experienced legal team will review your contract and help you cancel it, possibly saving you thousands of dollars. You gotta call right now for complete details. So listen, if you're not happy with your solar contract for any reason, we are here to help you cancel it. Call the Solar Exit Hotline now for immediate options to help you exit your solar contract. This call is 100% free. Call 855-227-0286. That's 855-227-0286. Call us right now.
Hey, welcome back here to the show. As we've talked about every day for 5 weeks, we break down producer Tony's preseason top 25. We are now at number 8, and we talked earlier about some names missing. Could today be the day? Tony, as you know, this is a great reveal, not only for our audience, but also for me as well. So who is at number 8 in your preseason top 25?
Number 8, we are going with the Miami Hurricanes. A little step down from last year. They made the title game last year, but Larry, one thing about making that title game the last few years anyway has kind of come with a little bit of a hex. The last 3 teams, including TCU and then Notre Dame 2 years ago, failed to make the playoff after going to the title game and losing. So I'm going to go with that. Maybe I still think that they will break that jinx. I definitely believe that. They are going to get rid of that. This is a team that will make the playoff. They're still very good, but they've got a lot of holes to fill. And I just think, when you have a lot of holes to fill coming in, it makes for a little bit of a downturn, not a big downturn. This is still a team that's probably going to go 10-2. So it's not like I'm predicting them to go 7-5 or something, but I think 10-2 is more likely for Miami, and they might just win their first ACC championship. They've never won one, been in the conference 24 years, never won an ACC championship. That's something they get corrected this year.
I would have lost that bet, but you're right. I guess back 11-2 the last year in the Big East, back in 2003, and really since then surprisingly only one 10-win season in the past 2 decades. That was back in 2017, 10-3 under Mark Richt, until 2 years ago with Mario Cristobal, who now has won 23 games in the past 2 seasons combined, and has this team rolling. But I would have lost that bet. I would have thought for surely they would have won an ACC title somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised when I read that as well when I was doing some research, and again, I think they're really good. I think they're definitely the class of the ACC. No doubt about that. I don't think anybody's going to even come close to challenging them in that regard. SMU will be decent, but, unless somebody really surprises the heck out of me, I just don't see it this year. The thing that bothers me a little bit about this team coming in, Larry, is they lost a lot in the trenches. This is one team, they have a ton of talent. They have a ton of playmakers. But you still have to have talent in the trenches to get it done. When you lose both your starting defensive ends, Bain and Maluga, that's tough to replace. You lose 3 starters on the offensive line. That's tough to replace. Can Mario Cristobal replace them? They bring in Darren Mensah, who's a great pickup from Duke. A lot of controversy surrounding that. He should be just as good, if not better, than Carson Beck last year. You've still got Mark Fletcher. You've still got Malachi Toney. Malachi Toney is a stud. Just get the ball in his hands. The other problem, Larry, is a little bit of depth. This is a team that should go 10-2 as long as they can keep Darian Mensah upright. There is very little depth in that quarterback room, especially depth that is experienced. So if anything happens to Darian Mensah, all bets are off with this Miami team.
Wow. And something too, you talk about in terms of their schedule and playing in conference. Surprisingly, Miami had never won 6 games in back-to-back seasons in the ACC until these last 2 years. That's how they have things rolling. Or you can also argue that, again, that's a result of the ACC maybe not being what they were at one time. Clemson down, Florida State down, some new players in there. But still, they have a chance. They haven't won 6 conference games in 3 straight years since the Big East days back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to know everything we need to know about this team probably in the middle part of the season. From October through November 7th, they're going to play Clemson, Florida State at home, Pitt at home, but then they got to travel to North Carolina, travel to Notre Dame on November 7th. So those 5 games are going to tell the tale, really, of the Miami season right there. The other ones are all very winnable games. They open up at Stanford, but Stanford hasn't been very good the past couple of years. I don't really see much of that changing this year. Then you go Florida A&M, Wake Forest, Central. So you're not really going to know much about Miami. They probably won't be tested when they get to Clemson, right? That's why I think this is more like a 10-2 ball club than an 11-1 team. 10-2 is still going to make the playoff this year.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, that the big game, really, the big test is that game at Notre Dame. And for both those teams, we'll see what they have. And get a chance to see Darian Mensah as well with this. If they come together, is this a team that you think has the pieces to contend for a national title?
Yeah, they still got a shot at it. Depends on how fast those lines can gel, right? You got to have that continuity in the offensive line. Guys have to know that if I make a call, the guy next to me understands what that call is, and can he pick up the block he's supposed to pick up that I'm giving over to him on this play. So if they can get that squared away, they should be fine. And again, the defense, a lot of playmakers, but I just don't like teams that lose both of their big ends, and those guys were so dominant last year.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, number 8, Miami on the preseason top 25. We'll continue with number 7 tomorrow. Producer Tony, thanks so much. Appreciate our guests stopping by. Matt Perkins, Eric Hansen, always appreciate you as well. Make this a fantastic day. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on the SportsIQ.
Thanks for listening to SportsIQ with Larry Smith, Monday through Friday. Continue the conversation at SportsIQ LS. We'll see you next time.